I don't know that when the rules surrounding the citizens' initiative process was changed to make it easier for people to put forward a question that could potentially go to referendum for all Albertans to vote on, that the UCP really thought it through in understanding that potentially these questions could be used against some of the things that they had put forward. But here we are. This teacher put forward a question, and the Chief Electoral Officer approved that question. Should the government of Alberta end its current practice of allocating public funds to accredited independent private schools? I guarantee this Chief Electoral Officer is not going to make it to the end of their contract. Now, there's a lot to unpack there. Comments have come up multiple times. Why is the Alberta government funding private schools? The answer is simple. Conservatives love privatization. Now, I know what you're going to say. Lisa, funding of private schools has gone on since 1958. And who do you think allowed that? Conservatives. I just want to make one thing clear, because I know this is going to be contentious. I have no problem if groups or organizations want to create a school to support whatever it is that they support. That should be your right to do so. Do I think the government should fund it 70%? The most in the whole country of funding private schools? No, I don't. I'm going to tell you why. Especially in light that Alberta funds the least in all of Canada for public education. The least! But here's why. So in response to this petition, which was just approved, there's nothing to sign as of yet, but in response, the chairperson from the Association of Independent Schools and Colleges of Alberta made a plea that this is just really pitting people against each other. School against school, teachers against teachers. So I looked at them. ASCA works to provide support to independent schools, ECS operators, and associate member schools with alternative programs in 3 key areas: advocating for school choice and parental rights in education. Now, in the political climate in Alberta, the term parental rights is a little spooky. And then they talk about how often they meet with the education minister. They seem to have a lot of input in terms of what happens. Now, I tried to click this link down here and it didn't take me anywhere. We work to equip member schools to successfully engage in political advocacy. Spooky. Then they have a whole bunch of FAQs. Why not just send children to public school? Blah, blah. Other parents react to permissive values or what they perceive as a lack of discipline in school. Spooky. A lot of these FAQs just really move to validate the purpose of having private schools. This was an interesting one. Should not schools avoid teaching about faith and religion? Catholic schools have existed for a really long time. They teach about faith and religion. But apparently, which is a weird way to start your answer, various faith groups operate 60% of Alberta's independent schools. Now, I looked. There's a variety of different types of schools. Certainly, there's a lot of Christian schools and some other schools that fit a niche. I'm not trying to minimize the need. It's a niche. And I have no problem if you want to have a Christian school that promotes Christian ideology, whatever that means. But with a lot of these independent schools comes independent ways of doing things. They get to decide who attends their school. Yes, they have to follow the curriculum, but we all know how well that's going in Alberta. But the school holds a lot of authority. It could be run by a board. And if you have issues with the public and Catholic school boards, imagine all the little baby boards for all these independent schools. Anyway, the question is, should these private schools be funded up to 70%, the most in the whole country, which averages about $500 million? The other 30% could come from tuition, fundraisers. They do get grants from the government. And the head guy at ASCA, as well as in the frequently asked questions, made it very clear that it's not just Richie Riches that are sending their kids to private school. And again, there's a lot of different types of schools. But let me focus on a Christian school. So if a church or an organization decides that it needs to have a Christian school, why shouldn't they pay for that themselves? Churches don't get taxed, right? But the other concern is that the Alberta government is now going to help these independent private schools with infrastructure. I think the problem is that for a lot of people, it's hard to understand why, when they send their kids to public school and they're jam-packed in a classroom, and now with the teacher strike, that regardless of the billions that the UCP are saying they're spending, it's still not enough. It's still the least in the whole country. But you're plucking a little bit from that and you're throwing it to people that kind of get to run their school however they want. That's the concern. Now, a fair point is, could all these students that are going to private schools be shoved into the public system? No, they couldn't. There's nowhere for them to go because Alberta funds public education the least in the country. And yes, independent private schools have been around for a long time in Alberta. Maybe if public education had been funded properly from the get-go in Alberta, people may not have an issue with private schools getting some cash, 70%. But in true conservative form, a huge lack of attention has been paid to public education, and so break the system to privatize the system. I know this whole thing is going to be played off by the government as pitting public against private, but I think the government needs to remember they are the ones who have chosen to pit public against private. And Dimitrios Nicolaides can stand there and say, Alberta's looking at a deficit. We can move the money around, but you're not getting more. Alberta is always coincidentally in a deficit when bargaining is happening. Maybe if you didn't put all your money in oil. Maybe if you didn't spend $80 million on Tylenol. I know we keep bringing that up, but see, that hasn't been dealt with either. Corrupt care. So I completely understand where this citizens' initiative question has come from. Because when it feels like one group is being valued more than another, it makes people look around for answers as to why. And I mean, based on where Danny's been, their views on parental rights, it also makes me question private schools. Not all of them, but a large chunk of them. 60% or so. Anyway, I'm sure there's going to be more information, the where and when if you want to sign this citizens' initiative. And if the government doesn't want people being pitted against each other, separatists versus true Canadians, public education versus private, stop doing things to pit people against each other. It's interesting that the only two citizens' initiatives right now, Forever Canadian and the Alberta Funds Public Schools. And Black Hat Guy's question is nowhere to be found.